Topic number 3. Jeff Gerstmann has played more VR than you. You've played a lot of VR. Every time I see one of these fob wash gifs, you're out there, you're doing stuff, you're throwing the bowling balls, you're punching things, you're swinging around, people are dancing. Dan Reichert's just laughing like an idiot.
Yeah, that's
what he does.
Again, insight. They sent us the headsets and we use them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, so I want to know about it because we have the Vive. We used it one morning, and then our room's too small. And we haven't done anything with it, and we're excited for PlayStation VR, but that'll get here when it gets here, and da-da-da-da. And Oculus, we're like, we're not PC people. That's not what we're about.
Sure. Right.
So for you, the more you've played, I mean, how do you, can you quantify it? How many hours, how many games?
How many games? It's probably like 40 or, games in some cases. But, it's probably something like 40, 50, 60 around.
And are you
there.
chasing it because you believe in it, because you enjoy it, because you fans enjoy it?
I enjoy it. People seem to enjoy our coverage, which is funny. Like you talk to some other sites out there writing news stories and stuff. They're like, oh, VR tanks. Like no one cares about it. And they actually does quite well for us.
Yeah.
But, we're doing videos. And
you're being goons with your friends wearing it, right?
Basically. Like, we're using it as intended, I feel. And there are some people out there that are, trying to be in the serious VR community. They're like, those guys aren't showing the games right. And I'm like, no, I think we're showing them all the way right. And it's, we're not necessarily playing things up to make things look bad. I want to put these headsets on and get like first impressions in a lot of cases. We're going to try this thing. It looks like Breakout. I don't know. Put the headset on. Let's go. Yeah, here's yet another version of Breakout that I can play with a headset on. Great. And that's been the problem. And it's the same thing we say about Steam, there are just a lot of games that anyone can put out whenever.
Sure.
And so the Oculus Store is a little more curated for better or worse, because that just means there's like really expensive bad games for sale there. Whereas like you see stuff that's like $6, $7 on Steam for the Vive. And there have been some really amazing things I've done in VR, but a lot of it has been, the equivalent of like a mini game. Like here's another take on Pong. Here's another tennis thing. Here's another sport kind of vaguely recreated. Here's a half-assed kind of shooting game. And all of it has been fascinating in its own way. And it's the sort of stuff that I look at it and like my take hasn't changed, from we did 8-hour streams at launch for both headsets, 9, whatever it was. And it's like, it's really great. There is a future of video games feel to it, but it's all very expensive. And most of these games are bad. So it's very early days, and eventually people will start to figure out what are the right ways to, it's sort of like, like iOS games were terrible when they first came out. Some say they still are.
I was going to say, Colin, sit back.
Like you can make a decent game for a touch screen.
Sure.
And people have gotten better at doing that in the years since the iPhone became a big deal. And I think VR is in that same state where like you just have a lot of people trying to figure out what they can do. And then you have a lot of people that are just like, hey, here's a quick way to make some money while people are content starved and bought this $800 headset. And so some of that stuff feels a little bit like a scam. But then you play something like Budget Cuts, which is a demo that's on Steam. It's for the Vive, and it's like a full-on stealth game that like seems really intelligently built around the mechanics. And that was the first time that actually I kind of got down low to look through a vent and actually put my arm out to steady myself on a wall that wasn't there.
Right.
And as soon as that happened, I was like, oh shit, it finally happened. Like it's a thing I'd been waiting for the whole time we had been doing these streams, because everything else was like, I'm not getting motion sick. I'm not feeling anything. It's just like, hey, here's kind of a dumb game. I'm going to keep hitting this ball or I'm going to keep shooting this stuff. But like you start to see little hints of people like, okay, that's a great mechanic that should be in everything where it makes sense. But then you see a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, well, you can throw stuff. Here's a bowling ball. You can throw it. I don't know. We rendered a bowling alley. We did some physics. There you go. So it's all over the place right now. So it's like this Wild West vibe, and I actually kind of like that about it, except for the part where it's all super expensive.
Yeah, I wonder, it seems like people are trying to get on board. The mentality seems to be very similar to getting a launch game out. It reminds me of PS2 launch, where there was actually a fucking asinine amount of games for PS2 when it came out. They were just all bad.
Surfing H3O, man.
Yeah, and like Summoner, and there's like, I think even From put out like multiple launch games.
Yep.
And it's like, which is like, and it reminds me a lot of that mentality where it's like, these games kind of suck, but you're getting here because it makes financial sense to get here, and at least you're the first to try and see what works and what doesn't.
Same reason like Ubisoft would always have like a bunch of Wii games at launch. There's
the Rabbids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever. Those games were okay for what they were.
Guys.
Right?
I hate those guys.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Do you think we asked this question to a lot of people, or I do anyway, that we meet and we talk to about success of the VR or whatever? Because I think Greg's a believer too. I'm certainly a believer in VR. I think it's awesome. I've not played nearly as many games as you have, but I do think it's a new way to play. I think it's akin to shoulder buttons. I think it's akin to analog sticks. I think it's akin to it's going to stay.
It makes the motion controller thing from the Wii and the Move controllers, it makes that stuff make sense in a way that it didn't before. When you're looking at a TV, you're like, but this is around you.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, I feel like it's like, well, like when we went from joysticks to D-pads, it was like, well, that makes sense, and this is the way it's going to be now. And I feel like VR, in a way, even though it's maybe going to take a slice off, we're still going to play games with controllers. I've always said I think we're still going to play games with controllers on screens in 50 years. I don't think there's going to be fundamental things that are ever going to change in that way. We might be doing it in different ways. But do you think that this will have long-term financial success, even though it's expensive? And who do you think will win? Because I don't really see a future, since it is so prohibitively expensive and since there is such a niche, that I don't really feel like everyone can win.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But also I think that not every player is in the space yet. And I think things are going to start to change more rapidly now that this stuff is out there. I think PlayStation VR is in a really good spot because they're going to hit a price point that makes more sense for more people. And they're going to be a little bit more focused on just, like games that make sense for that market. Hopefully, they'll I think they'll curate a little more tightly than Valve does with Steam, and I think that will be to their benefit. The performance is there with that headset.
You hope that with PlayStation, right? It's the lessons learned from Move and all these different things. Because when they announced it, that's what I kept saying. I'm like, this looks cool. I'm terrified it's gonna be another Move, which was like, hey, cool, I got it. And man,
then they literally hand you Move controllers, and you're like, oh no, what? No, don't know.
I'm a guy on a chair sliding down a hill, and I'm doing it with. They're like, what the fuck is going on?
And I think that's actually my one concern about PlayStation VR is the Move controller stuff not being as accurate as the Vive motion controllers. With the Vive motion controller, you can kind of move it as fast as your arms can move. With the Move. With the camera tracking on the PlayStation Move controller, I was doing something recently, which I can't actually say what it was, but I was trying to move as fast as I possibly could, and I was moving faster than the Move could track me. Now, this is not final software. I think they've got some improvements to make in the libraries and some other stuff, but it was that feeling that I had when the Move controller first came out of like, doesn't track well enough. And so that's my concern there. But also, I think mobile VR is going to be really bigger than I think some people might think, because you'll have, again, it'll be that price point sort of thing. And also the untethered nature of it.
I had that moment on a plane within the last 6 months where we landed, and I heard the lady like over the aisle go, what was that thing you were wearing? And he was taking off. I was like, I was like, oh my God, it's happening.
Yeah.
People are on planes just like, fuck it, doing this, looking at I'm being all weird.
But the other thing I think you'll see, and this might be the thing that actually changes more traditional games a little bit more than this, is when augmented reality, when AR or mixed reality, MR, I saw someone calling it recently, starts to kind of happen. There's a company, I think they're in Florida, Magic Leap, they're called, and they've got like something like $1 billion of investment. Very few people have tried their tech, but everyone I've talked to that has says it's the thing you want these VR headsets to be, that it's the real deal.
Oh, wow.
And there's a video on YouTube of it, of like the DreamWorks or Weta or somebody. Yeah, Weta did the graphics on it or something, and it's like you're putting on glasses, you're looking at an office, and then you're picking up a real gun that then gauges and dials, and
like a HUD pops up. Okay,
a HUD pops up, and then monsters start flying out of the walls and stuff, and you're gunning them down, and apparently that works as advertised in this YouTube video. And on top of that, they're a little bit beyond that, and apparently they're just straight up blasting the signal into your eyes.
Jesus,
which sounds really dangerous.
Yeah.
And so like it's they haven't been out there doing a lot of PR. Wired had a story recently that kind of shed some more light on what they're doing. But the thing that they said in there that you when you first hear it, it sounds insane. But then you start to think about it, you're like, actually, that might work. Once the resolutions get to a point that they need to be, is like, what if we just didn't have screens anymore? And the first thing people say is like, that'll never work because people want to have a social experience. It's like, okay, well, what if everyone's wearing the glasses and the social experience is still happening, but we're just all, wearing the glasses and the screen is over here, or we're all watching a movie and we're in different places, or we're all playing a multiplayer game that way.
Yeah.
They're saying in that Wired article, they said that like their employees are pretty soon going to not have monitors on their desks anymore because they're just going to be using the tech for their computer screens. Like
that's
the
awesome.
resolution is such that that's possible. It all sounds like a pipe dream. It all sounds
Sure.
insane. I'll believe it when I see it. But when you start to figure out what the future might look like of this stuff, as the screen technology gets better, as the resolutions improve, as the refresh rates improve, as there's more power driving the headsets, you start to see that this could actually start to happen. And it'll get cheaper as more and more people get into the space and as screen technology starts being made at a higher quantity. And that's the sort of stuff that starts to make changes. It's like, okay, well, maybe we'll still use controllers, but maybe we just won't have the screen. And it sounds crazy. And I know there are a lot of people that are just like, that's never going to happen, because I'm kind of halfway there. But also the possible future, when you start to spend a lot of time with a Vive and all this other stuff and realize this is a first-gen product, what's that going to look like in 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm excited about, because I identify, I think, with the big three right now, which I would say would be Vive, Oculus, and then Sony is an Achilles heel for each of them, but also a route to success. And I feel like I agree with you that Sony, Lauren Lanning was actually the one that kind of convinced me that Sony was the one that was was probably going to be most successful out of the gate. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But he had but this was a long time ago. The whole price point's going to be right. They already have a ubiquitous box. It seems to me that
and it's incredibly comfortable. Like
I agree.
The PlayStation VR, like they are a hardware company. They made it really, really well.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think their Achilles heel obviously is going to be hardware.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole reason why they're making a new console, and I think that until we can get onboard processing on these things, which is far away and at an affordable price point, that it's going to be shitty to be tethered to this machine that is just not strong enough to run the games that it can really run. On the other side, you have Oculus, which I think is going to suffer from not only its high price point, but being first in a lot of ways, even though they aren't the first VR headset. Technically, they are the first one of any visibility in this new kind of rush. But it reminds me a lot. I was thinking about this recently. It reminds me a lot of N-Gage in a way, where everyone's like, what the fuck is this shit? Who wants to play these games on their phone? And then 3 years later, everyone's playing games on their phone, and Nokia's over here being
Schneider was like, I told you.
So I think that there could be something with that where it's like it's too expensive, it's too soon, but they have a lot of funding from Facebook, so they're good. And I think Vive has a visibility problem. So I think, and I don't mean an optics problem for the machine. I mean, I think they have a
also
visibility problem.
HTC is tethered to the phone market in a lot of ways, and they're not doing the numbers there that a Samsung is. There's a lot of stuff along those lines as well. But yeah, Oculus is having a ton of trouble just getting headsets to the people that want to pay for them.
Yeah, that's what I've been reading, which is astounding. People that even, I think, supported it very early aren't getting theirs, but you can go in a store and buy one.
So the Best Buy, they must have done some deal with Best Buy a while ago that they had to honor, even though their shipment thing went totally sideways, right? There's no other reason why they would do it. But it sounds like that Best Buy is, in some cases, we're getting like 5 of them. So it wasn't even going to put a huge dent in that pre-order market. And was probably something they were just beholden to in a way they couldn't get out of. That's my guess. But they're not talking about a lot of stuff. And they made some changes recently to the Oculus software that actually locks out Vive users. Some people had made some kind of hacky middleware stuff that was running Oculus games on a Vive. They have since locked that up. From the sounds of it, not on purpose. It's just some other changes they made to avoid hacks and stuff. But still, in early days, that's the sort of stuff that doesn't look great. But more importantly, I think they maybe underestimated the early adopter market, and it's something that I did as well. I thought the Oculus story makes sense. They put it out, you use a gamepad. Then when enough people have the headsets, they go, hey, check this out. Here are some controllers. But it turns out anyone crazy enough to spend $600 is crazy enough to spend $800 and get a Vive and get the controllers right off the bat. And that is a much richer experience than what you get with an Oculus and an Xbox controller on a PC.
Right. The first time we got to play the Vive, for me, and I think it was for you too, was down at Rooster Teeth in the Achievement Hunter. And it was like somebody tosses you the thing and you grab it in the space.
You're like the thing from that video where they you can totally do that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That was also the first time I had the experience where I forgot my I had no spatial awareness, and I fucking nailed Nick Scarpino when I was playing like some game on it. I just turned around and just whacked him. And I'm like, shit.
He was trying to film you being an
that's
idiot.
That's his fault for getting in close.
Exactly.
So like all that stuff is really great. But at the same time, a lot of the games are very much not great, and everything is really expensive. You have a case where like a game like The Climb that Crytek made is like $50 on the Oculus Store, and it's not a very good game. You have a lot of cases where like Job Simulator is a wonderful mini game kind of thing. It's a great illustrative thing of the power of the touch controllers or the Vive wands and stuff like that. But also at launch they wanted like $40 for it.
Right.
And they've cut price since then. So people are figuring.
But when it comes to PlayStation, it'll be the same deal.
Yeah. Like, and that'll be curious to see if people have learned those lessons, or if they're in so deep that they literally have to charge this for it because they need to try to make their money back.
And I'm sure they have to set precedent too. I'm sure PlayStation will be pushing the precedent of what it's going to cost to put out a PlayStation VR game.
But I also think that and this is something we talked about with Shuhei at GDC, which I think goes to the point you were making earlier about curation, which is having a great volume of launch games makes sense for hardware that's proven. So we had it with within the Sony ecosystem. Vita had a lot of launch games. PS4 actually had a lot of launch games, and we know what these can do or whatever. I actually think the opposite should be true with VR, even though I don't think it's going to be true. And this is what I was trying to stress to Shuhei, is like, you guys better find your 4 or 5 best games, and you better leave it at that, man. Because if you launch with all this fucking garbage, this is a new way that we have got to teach people how to play and accept. And if you come out and people feel burned spending $100 on some of these fucking trash games that I know are going to be on the PlayStation Network, because they're on the PlayStation Network every goddamn week on PS4 and Vita.
You talk about like it's not unlike Steam, where you're just like, oh, here's this like mobile, like what is it, tennis in the face and stuff. You're like, check out this phone game we made work with the PlayStation.
It's
like,
it's unbelievable. Why? So I'm like, you guys better take a different tact, because I really do think this is going to injure the product. If you like, it's almost what I've been saying about PSN for years, where I'm like, you could probably get rid of 75% of these games completely, and I don't think anyone would give a flying fuck. How much could this game, with this broken the drop description like we were talking about on PS I Love You, that's translated from Japanese that no one even proofread,
right.
How many hundreds of copies is that going to sell? I mean, can you really just get rid of it, and then when someone searches for a game of a similar name, they actually find what they're looking for and it's good? Is there any quality control? I do think that there's and so in VR, what I'm saying, I guess, is there's a subjectivity to video games. We talk about it all the time. One man's trash is another man's treasure. I think that's true. I do think in VR it's a little different. I do think that there's going to be an objective measure of quality about how a game works, how it runs, and how and its frame rate and all of that kind of stuff. And you must pay attention to that stuff, because if people have a bad experience with VR their first or second time, they're never going to go back to it, and you are going to lose them forever.
Yeah, I suspect that like the requirements. I actually like talking to developers. I think the requirements for getting a VR game onto Sony's stuff, there are more performance requirements than you would have for, say, a traditional game. So I think they realized that, like, people get sick if they get this wrong. So they'll probably, hopefully, put it through the ringer there.
I hope so, because that's my one major fear, is that seeing PSN slowly turn into the App Store has really been distressing, because it's still a good place where you can play great games, but I look at PSN all the time, and we pay very close attention to that ecosystem, and I'm like, what the hell is this
These
shit?
games that limp out they're nowhere, they're featured on the store, like, what the hell?
Xbox One is not that different. Their storefront is definitely, but at the same time, like, I feel like those games don't get featured very often, and that's the difference. And that's the problem you run into when you say, hey, anyone can publish on our platform. We're open to indie devs. Like, you want to do that because you want to get as many games as possible, but that's also going to open the floodgates for a bunch of stuff that you would rather probably not see on your system. And so, I think if you're looking at it as closely as we are, because that's our daily job, is to go look at the new releases on Steam, PSN, all this other stuff, and go like, did anything come out? No, this week, what's going on? And you see like 8 games that you've never heard of that you look at and go, okay, this like $1.49 thing is trash. I wonder what percentage of the overall consumer base on PSN is actually digging that deep, because it's not like the store's great at exposing that stuff. But
then it brings up the point of why should it be on there at all, and that's a whole nother like topic or whatever. I'd love to see. We've talked about this before. Some sort of objectivity panel at Sony or something, where it's like 20 people like play a little bit of everything.
They're sitting there in their Kryptonian robes, up or down.
Well, like, in a serious way, being like, we got this game, we can put it through certification, we can make a little bit of money on it, like, but should we even have it at all? Like, can you all just play it and just tell me, like, and if 15 of you think we should have it, then we'll put it up, even if it's just okay. But this is like, it always brings me back, like, they're just such busted ass games on PSN, and I just don't believe that they're going to keep that away from PSVR, no matter how stringent their QA and their certification is. This shit's going to be on there, and someone's first entry into this is going to be one of those bad games, and they're going to lose them.
Yeah, but I think, like, the dark end of that is the early days of, or most of Xbox Live Arcade and the Xbox 360, where they kept a very tight grip on that and had like one game a week, and sometimes that game was not great, and you're like, okay, well, I guess this week's game sucks. And they eventually loosened it up a little bit. They're like, oh, we got 2 games, we got 3 games, but it was still like, you would talk to developers and they'd be like, I don't want to work with them, because like if we can't get through this process, it's not even worth, like, we're wasting money developing this build at all if we're not going to be able to get on the store. And then on top of that, because of the way the store is built, and I think this is a problem with definitely with Steam, I think PSN, same deal. If they don't get featured, the game might as well not exist. It's the thing you hear about app stores on phones all the time, is if you don't get featured, your game is dead. Like, that's starting to happen. That's definitely happening on Steam. And it's definitely, or it's happening to a certain extent on Steam, and I think it's happening more and more on consoles as well. As you hear people saying, like, well, we didn't get the promotional slot that this platform holder said we were going to because someone else came in and bought up all the space or whatever happened.
And this doubles back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Where it's like, okay, cool, I'm a big .com video game website. I'm only going to cover the top 5% of games.
Totally.
And so I just had an indie developer hit me up that I need to respond to because we're so busy. But an email is just like, how do I get anyone to pay attention to my game? Like, I'm trying, I've taken all this feedback. I'm hitting up, podcasts with codes and trying to get people to play it, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, I think that's the reality of it now, is that, every week, like, we've started saying no to more games. Like, we used to record more quick looks than we do now, but it was a situation where it's like, we're doing these games that, like, no one really wants to see. Like, the numbers bear out to a point where it's like, we should probably take this time and spend it a different way. And so we scaled back a little, like ever so slightly. It's like, okay, well, if we're doing 15 now, we're doing 12, like that sort of thing. And yeah, so we spend a lot of time looking at games that we then go on to not cover, because we look at it and go like, nah, I think we're okay there.
We did the same thing with Let's Plays. We were doing a Let's Play every day, and some of these were then just like, cool, here's this download that looks interesting. Oh, we're playing it, it's not that interesting. And the audience was like, I wasn't even interested off the thumbnail or headline or name, so I didn't even come to watch it.
Like, if we feel like we have something to say about a game, if we come out and go like, hey, here's something you need to see, or hey, here's something you need to see so that you don't go down this road and buy this, like, that's the sort of stuff that we're more likely to spend our time on. And that's, I think that's been very frustrating for a lot of indie developers, but they're kind of experiencing the same thing that big publishers experienced 5 years ago when everyone said, hey, like, we're going to come to your event, but we're not going to write a hands-on preview of the kids game you're making because no one in our audience wants to read that story. Or, hey, we're not going to shoot as many interviews at this event as we would have 3 years ago because the numbers say that, these 5 games, that no one wants to watch that video.
It seems like PR gets it, right? Or developers and publishers get it. We're like, so for E3, I've been hit up somebody. I'm like, cool, game looks great. Not our thing. That's not what we're known for, so I can't really help you. Yeah. My audience doesn't want to see that.
It's viciously cyclical, I think, too, in the sense that, like, I do feel bad for some of these indie devs. You were talking about 8.4 before, and then someone pointed me to their podcast because when they had the Shovel Knight guys on, they were talking about how they were going to get the game out, and they were talking about how they identified me as someone who was like, we know Colin loves Mega Man, we know he loves all these things, we're going to go after him with Shovel Knight or whatever and really try to get him interested in it.
Fucking
and my first thing was like, my first thing was like, I don't know how you guys could have made this game and not understood that this game was going to be huge. But apart from that, you shouldn't have to be so fucking focused to try to get your game out there yet. Because everyone's spamming their bullshit all the time at you, you can't see you can't separate the wheat from the chaff, as you always say. So like the games that rise to the top, like Axiom Verge or whatever, or Shovel Knight or whatever, in their wake are thousands of games that people tried to make you pay attention to in the same exact way. So it's sad that people have to be so focused and kind of salvo certain people to try to get them to pay attention to the games. And for most people, it does not work.
And sometimes I think that ends up coming across as a little creepy. When you feel like you've been targeted to, like, we're going to make you understand that this game is something you need to cover. It's like...
Especially then if you don't like it. Like,
well, I'm
a big fan of these games. This one's not...
That's how it goes sometimes. Like, you got your wish.
Yeah.
With Yacht Club specifically, I thought it was funny because I remember they emailed me and, at the time when we were at IGN still, I had no idea that, they had, like, they like, were like, we know Colin is a huge fan of these games. And in my mind, I'm like, it makes sense. But they showed it to me and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? This game looks awesome. So like, you totally are right. Like, and I'll totally write about it.
Like, thanks for realizing I would be into this, because I totally am.
Yeah, and I was so happy about that. Same thing to a lesser extent with Axiom Verge, which was a game that I was like super into as well. But in its kind of preview coverage. But for every one of those games, I also had the emails or the people being like, this is your kind of game and you're going to love this. It's just like Mega Man. And I play it, or I'm like, this game fucking sucks. Like, why are you, this game is nothing like Mega Man. Like, what?
You insult the name Mega Man by
but it's
bringing
like,
him into this.
How dare you?
But it's like, but it's one of those things where I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? This game's like Mega Man. Now you're just taking advantage of me. And it's kind of a different kind of thing. So I think that there's, for all those hits, where it's like, well, yeah, you're right. I love this game and I think it's really cool and I'm going to write about it because I think it's a lot of fun. There were 10 misses where it's like, you know, and that's where all the shit gets lost.
That used to happen at like a major publisher level too, where my understanding is for some period of time, my file at EA said that I really liked hockey. So I would get into random conversation. And before I had heard this from someone, EA people would be like, hey, how's it going? And then start talking about hockey. And I'd be like, yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, hockey, great. I don't care. I don't dislike hockey. I liked a couple of EA hockey games in '93.
Sure.
But and it's weird things like that. Like that's I guess some additional level of creepiness or whatever.
Oh, dude,
like, they're keeping a file on.
Yeah,
us.
when I first learned about that publishers, and this is true, I guess maybe still, I don't know, is that like publisher PR agencies have little things about like, this is what you like. Mine probably says Colin loves fucking the like the apocalypse and dystopia and all this kind of stuff.
It does say Colin loves the apocalypse.
You know, like all this weird shit, and I'm like, I've never seen one, but I wish I could just see what it says about me at EA or one of these things over the years. But at the same time, it is really weird, but it's surgical because and that's the word I'm really looking for. It's not focused, it's surgical and it's smart. But the surgical shit goes off the fucking reservation way more often than it doesn't.
Right.
When people are trying to make these tacit connections that don't exist. My 2D side scroller is like Metroid. I'm like, no.
No, it's not.
It certainly isn't like Metroid. Thanks for wasting 15 minutes of my time. And then you start to get disenchanted with these random blast emails you get and all these kinds of things as well. And then things don't rise to the top. And then it's the same shit over and over again. But that's kind of just the vicious cycle.
It's led to a point where, like, you know, we definitely do, like, we get people just contacting us saying like, hey, here's a game, and you know, we'll check out some of them if it sounds interesting, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't, and a lot of stuff that just, you know, like we don't really cover Kickstarters if they have not crossed the funding line yet, unless there's something very newsworthy about it, like, hey, this major player got in, isn't that weird?
Right.
And then the story is more about, hey, how desperate are they? Goodness, you know, like that sort of thing. Not always.
Times have changed. He's down on his luck.
Look at those guys. But we just get nonstop Kickstarter pitches. Like, hey, here's a game. We're launching the Kickstarter tomorrow. Here's our trailer. It's like, we're not going to run ads for your.
You're not a promotional
thing.
avenue.
Yeah, like that's not what we're here to do. And you know, if your game is good, we'll point people to it when they can buy it. By running video or coverage then or something if we think it's worth, if we think it looks cool,
not taking a shot on concept art and
2 years and that's gone for a lot of people. Like, we've been offered interviews with people who are, you know, major figures in the video game industry that have launched Kickstarters and be like, sorry, no, we're not going to do it.
It's funny though that it goes both ways. I do want to say that there was this, you're working at a place like IGN you were so used to, and I'm sure you had the experience at Giant Bomb and obviously GameSpot, where you kind of reach out to someone and they typically answer you because they're like, oh, this is probably could be fortuitous for me to have this conversation with this person in terms of like, you know, getting my game out there or whatever. And I remember someone pointed me to this, and I don't know if it still exists. It was like this 16-bit style role-playing game set in the American Revolution. And it was like being Kickstarter or something like that. And I reached out to them and I'm like, yo, this looks fucking awesome. Like, can we interview? Like, and they never answer me. And I'm like, so it goes both ways. You don't want to talk to me either.
Sometimes you have to let the sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. That was topic 3, and it was sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a landing page, a beautiful gallery, or a professional blog or online store, it's all included with your Squarespace website. Creating your website with Squarespace is simple, intuitive, and easy to do. We did it with kindoffunny.com Gen 1.
Yeah, we did it.
Wow.
Nick Scarpino did it with kindoffunny.com Gen 1 because, again, Colin and I would just have a table. We would sit here and talk into an iPhone. You can add and arrange your own content and features with the click of a mouse. You get free custom domains, beautiful templates, and 24/7 customer support. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and enter the offer code kindoffunny to save 10% on your first purchase.